We returned here to analyze just how this Baltimore Ravens team has done through 7 weeks. Next here on Locked On Ravens with a very special guest.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we've returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. This episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. And we returned here Purple Friday. There's no game this weekend as the Ravens are on their Week 8 bye, but that doesn't mean the content stops. And here to dive into all that content here today is IngravenVids making his return to the show. Ingraven, I wish, as I was talking about off the stream here, I wish we were talking after a win, but unfortunately, as you said, you can't go 17-0 every single year. So these losses, they do happen. How you doing today?
I'm good. And I'm over the Bengals beatdown that we took the other day. And hey, it's all part of it, man. It's all part of the plan. Ravens, you can't win every single game, so they just got to move forward now.
Yeah, exactly. And the Bengals came to play. That was their biggest game of the year by far. And, credit to them. You have to tip your hat to what they were able to do on both sides of the ball, stopping a very good Ravens team. Ingraven, we'll talk about what the Ravens have done throughout these first 7 weeks in the second and third segments. But I know a big topic of conversation has really been with the trade deadline coming up on November 2nd. The Ravens, they have been dealt countless injuries over the course of the season, and really it's on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. So people are kind of concocting their ideas and saying, hey, what about this guy? What about this guy? So I want to start there in this segment and ask your opinion. I guess more of a general question before we get into actual positions, and you can go into whatever detail you want here, but should the Ravens, with their cap situation, the free agents that could pop up this offseason, including guys like Anthony Averett, Bradley Bozeman, Deshaun Elliott, do you think it would be in the Ravens' best interest to make a trade to help their team this year?
I think a trade that could help would be to both on offense for either an offensive lineman, but I feel like that'd be tougher because if teams are getting rid of a starting caliber offensive lineman, you're taking it, or even if you're taking their leftovers, what is that really doing for you, and what does that say about that offensive lineman who they're getting rid of? So I would probably say the more likely scenario would be for a running back. And I know a lot of people have been talking about running back. That seems like an easy answer. But when you look at Ravens running back situation, it's rough. Obviously, like you talked about, like you brought up earlier with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill, the injuries, they've been rough. They've been rough on all sides of the ball, but definitely at the running back position. And it's been a reminder like, hey, those running backs that we had, they are very, very special. They got the job done, and they really showed that it's not just a plug and play type of thing. Le'Veon Bell, he's with Le'Veon Bell is very interesting because initially I thought, all right, Le'Veon Bell, it's not really a good fit. It's not a good fit, especially Ravens fast-paced offense. You got to be quick. You got to make quick decisions. But then I remember there was a day where I was just watching film on Le'Veon Bell. And I was like, oh, he does have that ability to make those quick decisions. But then when you watch him with the Ravens, it hasn't looked good. Now, the offensive line hasn't been good either now. But at the same time, Le'Veon Bell is just, whenever he gets the ball, it's like everything it slows down a bit. With Devontae Freeman, he's probably right now been our best running back. But, I mean, it's not really saying much. And one thing, too, I wish at this point that they would feed him a bit more because it seems like the Ravens, they are very high on Le'Veon Bell, which obviously from experience they are. But it's almost like they're force feeding with Le'Veon Bell when Devontae Freeman has been the most explosive runner recently. But it's not enough. And I feel like Tyson Williams is a better runner than a Devontae Freeman, but I don't think Tyson Williams is going to be here past the Vikings game or by the time we play the Vikings. I think that he's going to be gone because I really think his fate was sealed. on that fourth down play in the Bengals game, where I forgot what the score was. They were obviously up big on us, but it just seemed like he just gave up because it was fourth down. Lamar checked it down to him. He made one guy miss, and then he just sort of like ran out of bounds and like gave up on the play. He should have cut upfield or whatnot. It's like he just stopped trying. Was like, oh, you know what, whatever. So I think he'll be gone. So that's another reason why I definitely think a younger running back, a more explosive running back, would be the best trade. And with Latavius Murray, him being hurt, even when he gets healthy, he's not that explosive guy. He's not that big play guy. He's like just a straightforward, maybe 3, 4, 5 yard running back. And I don't think they expect him to get any big runs, anything like that. But I would say definitely for a running back, a younger guy, explosive guy, a guy that can just make those big plays and turn nothing into something.
Yeah, and to your point, Engraven, I think the running back position to me was one that I think a lot of people undervalue. That people always say, well, you don't have them past 30. That's the old age for them. And I really appreciate guys like J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards in an offense like Baltimore's. And I think this has helped people appreciate them even more because I think people, when they signed guys like Le'Veon Bell and Latavius Murray, Devonta Freeman, they said, well, this running offense is so good anyway. It doesn't matter who's back there. It'll be good regardless. Whereas in reality, you're missing Gus Edwards and his ability to not lose yards on almost every play. J.K. Dobbins and his cutback ability, home run hitting ability. And now we're seeing that, this isn't 2016 with Latavius Murray and Devonta Freeman and Le'Veon Bell. Unfortunately, these guys have lost a step. And, that's not me bashing or anything. It's just literally what it is. So I think that a running back would be a good addition. Engraven, do you have any names in mind at the running back position where you think it would make sense for the Ravens, both from a draft capital perspective and a financial perspective?
Now that it's past that awkward stage, since we already played them, and that's past, because if we hadn't played them yet and we like, oh, you know what, let us get Marlon Mack, then it might be a little bit awkward. But now we're past that. So maybe Marlon Mack, there's Miles Sanders, there's even maybe David Montgomery, but I don't really have anybody too in particular in mind. Just a young guy who may be undervalued by his current team, maybe not getting the touches by his current team, or maybe a younger guy that may have shown once like, hey, I could tote the rock. You just got to give me the chance. And I think a really good, now I don't think it's likely though, but will be James Robinson from the Jaguars, but I don't think that even happens. But so I don't even know. But I would just say a young guy who, like I said, his value by his current team is low. So Ravens could almost steal him away.
Yeah, and I know Philip Lindsay is another name that's been mentioned as well. He could be someone who fits, but I like the James Robinson idea. But again, as you said, I don't really know if they're going to be willing to give him up, especially with Travis Etienne on the shelf for the entire season. It just doesn't seem very likely for them to give him up. And to your point also of acquiring a running back versus acquiring an offensive lineman, the draft capital perspective there, a running back's going to be a lot cheaper in terms of picks to acquire right now. And as you said earlier, there's just not a lot out there. I mean, the Ravens signing Cedric Ogbuehi to the practice squad yesterday, and those are the types of moves that I think for the Ravens, at least, that's what they're going to have to get, because if they want to acquire a guy like a Morgan Moses or Andre Dillard, it might cost them a lot more in draft capital. Right. It's just that whole thing where with the Ravens and having so many good free agents in the 2022 offseason, they're going to need all these picks to draft rookies to hopefully give them some better impact. But Engraven, moving on to the defensive side of the ball, I know a lot of people have mentioned the inside linebacker position, maybe a cornerback for the Ravens to acquire here. Even the defensive lineman, but personally, I think Derek Wolfe is their trade deadline acquisition on the defensive line. I think that'll be their guy. Do you see any way that the Ravens could possibly acquire an inside linebacker or a cornerback during this trade deadline? Do you think that's worth it for them, with the Ravens now having Josh Bynes in there with Patrick Queen, and at the cornerback position having guys like Anthony Averett?
No. I honestly, and like you mentioned, Chris Westry, he'll be back soon enough. Derek Wolfe, he'll be returning too. Really, I think the biggest thing with the defense, and not really to switch gears, but I think it's scheme more than anything. I think that with Wink, he has to realize who he has out there. He has to realize their strengths. He has to also realize their weaknesses, and he has to do a better job of putting them in positions to succeed in adjusting. I feel like that's been the biggest problem on defense, besides the tackling and whatnot. But I just feel like on defense, a trade, I just don't feel like a trade would really move the defense over the top. I mean, it's always nice to acquire more players and acquire more good players, but I feel like more than anything right now, it would be the scheme.
Yeah, and I think we saw kind of the good and almost the bad of kind of going all in to acquire a defensive player. I think with Marcus Peters in 2019, you saw the good there. You get him for cheap with Kenny Young and a 5th-round pick, and that's like the steal of the century. But then you look to 2020 and you see the Yannick Ngakoue trade, and it's kind of like forcing a player into a scheme. It doesn't fit him whatsoever. And you see the Ravens give up a 3rd and a 5th for him, and it doesn't really pay off. Now, the move at the time, I mean, I loved it. I thought that he was going to be the player for them to take them over the top because he could win one-on-ones, fast off the edge. But sometimes, regardless of how good the player is, the scheme just is not a good fit, and that can have a tremendous impact. So they'd have to do their due diligence, and even on the offensive or defensive side of the ball, getting a new player in, having them learn a playbook. You know, when Earl Thomas was here in 2019, he'd said this Baltimore defense is so hard to learn. You know, it's complicated. So even for guys who are in the defense, look, we all know what happened with Earl Thomas, but I do think that kind of has a factor in everything. So I think definitely I agree with you, Ingraven, on the offensive side of the ball, running back and offensive lineman. That's what takes priority for me as opposed to a defender at this point. But we'll head into our first break. When we get back, we'll talk about the Ravens offense, talk about what they've done well through 7 weeks, what they haven't, what they can improve upon. So stay tuned for that. But this episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and the support of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. You can go into McDonald's after a Little League game, or you can stop there after a big sporting event. So head to your local McDonald's and refuel and reconnect. I'm loving it. We return here, our second segment of this Purple Friday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with IngravenVids. And Ingraven, this whole season for the Ravens, a lot of storylines. We have the injury storyline, which is going to be there throughout the entire year, regardless of how well they do, how well they don't do. But on the offensive side of the ball, one of those storylines coming into the year was, could Lamar Jackson take that year 4 leap? And I think so far he has. Now, there's still room to improve, right? Sometimes he holds the ball for a bit too long and tries to make something that just isn't there, and he'll run into a sack or something. The deep ball accuracy has been a bit inconsistent. We saw turnovers early in the year, but I think he's cleaned up on those a little bit as the season has progressed. How impressed have you been with Lamar Jackson so far through 7 games? Because I have seen a vast jump from him.
Yeah, certainly. I remember thinking this offseason, especially with the additions of Keith Williams and T. Martin, I'm like, okay, I do expect the pass offense to jump a little bit, not anything crazy, maybe jump 5 spots high or something like that. But they have taken a huge leap forward. Now, I do think that had we had J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, I don't think the jump forward would have been as drastic as it's been. I almost think they've been forced to take a bigger leap forward because of the running back situation. But it's been a good thing. It's worked itself out to where the Ravens actually like have a passing game. Like we can actually sit here and talk about the Ravens passing game, and it's a legitimate thing. It's something that is to be respected by teams. And Lamar, he certainly has taken a big jump. And in a lot of games, not every game, but in a lot of games, one of the biggest things that I noticed from him is that he takes what the defense gives him a lot of times with the check down, because we know when he's not pressing. Now, when he's pressing, like he ended up pressing in that Bengals game, he's always looking for the big play, looking for that big shot. But in the games where he's more calm, more relaxed and whatnot, when there's less pressure on him, he takes that check down, and that's a big part of his game that can help him as far as, because, you know, once he starts pressing, he'll start taking off. He'll start trying to do everything himself, because I noticed that a lot in the Chiefs game and also in this past Bengals game, where he's like, man, like, where's my help? You know what? Nobody want to help me. I'm going to do it myself. And he literally, like, with the Chiefs game, it obviously worked in his favor, but with the Bengals game, we know how that went. But I have loved what I've seen. I think one of the biggest things with Lamar is what's right in front of him, that being the offensive line. It's been like almost unfair when he has time in the pocket. Because when he has time in the pocket, you watch this guy, he'll sit back there, he'll look, find a receiver, hit him in stride, and he's looked really good. Yeah, like you mentioned, the deep ball accuracy has been up and down. But in my opinion, I think it's been better than it was last year. Because he's been connecting on a lot more deep shots this year, and they've been taking a lot more deep shots this year too. So that's where it starts for me is the fact that you're actually taking more deep shots consistently this year. Because that was something last year where it was like, man, what's going on? But they're getting that this year, and I love it. And one thing that I'm really excited for with this passing game to take another step forward is when Sammy Watkins gets healthy. Because with and I don't mean to jump ahead too much right now, but with Rashad Bateman, he's come in and looked like he came in the Chargers game, and it looked like he had been playing for the past like 5 weeks before, even though he had been out. And I know he'd been practicing for a couple of weeks, but still, I'm like, man, this guy, like, he doesn't look like a rookie. He doesn't look like he's missed a bunch of time. He came in and it was like he had been there already. So when Sammy Watkins comes back and you got Hollywood doing what he's been doing, and you got Rashad Bateman so just comfortable from jump, it's just a beautiful thing. And I love how he's been getting that help from his weapons. I think you mentioned a couple of days ago on Twitter that every single Rashad Bateman catch has gone for a first down. And could it be coincidence, or could it be that's Rashad Bateman doing Rashad Bateman things? We'll see in the future, but it's a beautiful thing that we can talk about Lamar. And a lot of us Ravens fans, we've known already that we know Lamar can throw the ball. That whole narrative from the media and whatnot, we've already known that for years that Lamar can throw the ball. He's already shown that. But now people are respecting it more because he's getting both, or some people are respecting it more, but because he's getting both the touchdowns, but also the yards that come with it. And unfortunately, even though yards, they can be an overrated stat when it comes to the passing game, because it's really all about efficiency. But more people are taking notice because he's getting the yards too.
Yeah, exactly. And, hopefully Engraven, we're talking here months down the line and say every Rashad Bateman catch in the entire year went for a first down. I think that'd be something, but maybe a little bit unsustainable. But so far, he's been that chain mover and somebody who I'm personally really excited about. And I want to kind of continue down that road because I think the Ravens have a very bright future with both Marquise Brown and Rashad Bateman at the wide receiver position. It seems like Baltimore really hit on both of those players. We've seen the ascension from Marquise Brown, and he's not a perfect player. The drops do have to get ironed out a little bit, but I do think he looks crisp coming out of his routes. He's cooking guys at the line of scrimmage. It's stuff that I'm really excited about because, as you mentioned, Lamar Jackson, compared the whole conversation compared to guys like Kyler Murray, who has DeAndre Hopkins and all his weapons, and Josh Allen, who has all his weapons. When Lamar Jackson was working back in 2018, 2019, 2020, it wasn't guys of that caliber, and he was still doing a lot with those guys. So now that he has Marquise Brown, Rashad Bateman, how excited are you not only for them and their growth, but also for what they can do for Lamar Jackson moving forward?
It's a beautiful thing, especially because these are guys that are young. These are guys that are still on their rookie deals. So they're going to be with the Ravens for the foreseeable future. The only one that's up in the air right now is Sammy Watkins. But it's a beautiful thing, man. And I love it for the Ravens. I love it for Lamar. I love it for those receivers because it can only get better from here. It's not like their connection, it's not like their chemistry or their rapport, anything can get worse. No, it can only go up. And to the point where it's at right now, for it to get better than what it is, that's gonna be nice, man. So I'm excited for the here and now, but excited for the future too.
Yeah, no, I definitely am too. And Engraven, when you talk about this offense, I know there's one guy you have to talk about, not Lamar Jackson, that's another guy, but Mr. Greg Roman himself, the offensive coordinator, who is actually your profile picture on Twitter. You've been showing Greg Roman some love over there. Somebody who I think has definitely improved his play calling over this entire season. Now, there have been those quarters where it seems like he's not adjusting and kind of going with something that just isn't there. But I think overall, from a general perspective, I've been impressed with what Roman has done this year. Do you agree with that? Where's your stance on Greg Roman at this point? I know the Bengals loss kind of puts a sour drape on everything, but where are you with Greg Roman this year?
Yeah, even in the Bengals loss, I felt like the biggest problem in the Bengals loss wasn't even the play calling, it was execution. Because there was just a lack of protection all game long. And then, like I said earlier, Lamar started pressing and he ran into that Ogunjobi sack. He ran into a Sean Hubbard sack too. So I just feel like it was execution more than anything. But with Greg Roman, I was somebody last year. I was like, it's time to move on. I think it's best that we part ways, that we let Greg Roman go, and just move in a different direction. Let's get a fresh start, new season. But when they decided to keep him, I'm like, okay, all right, cool, it is what it is. But then when they brought in T. Martin and Keith Williams, I was very excited about that, but I was still worried at the same time because I'm like, okay, you can bring in these wide receiver coaches who got some good experience around the league and whatnot, but will they actually have a voice? Will they actually be heard when they may make a suggestion? If they have something that they want to implement, will they be heard? Because they brought them in an area where Greg Roman struggled at for the passing game. And it definitely appears that their voices have been heard, and Greg Roman and they just work together well. And they've taken a lot of what we had already and made it that much better. And then they added a little bit too. And what I mean when I say that, we already had Hollywood. He was here already. We had Duvernay. We had Prochet. We had these guys here already, but now you're seeing them used in different ways. Like this Hollywood, this is something that was a big concern for me and something that I was hoping to see. And I said it before, a lot of times that if they used Hollywood the way that they use him in the playoffs, if they use him in the regular season that way, then, oh, man, he could be great. He could be phenomenal. And they've been doing that. They've been using Hollywood the way that they would use him in the playoff games. They've been using him like that in the regular season. And we've seen when Prochet gets his opportunities, he makes the most of it. He makes stuff happen. And then even with Duvernay as well, Duvernay been making a few plays here and there too. So, and then of course with Sammy Watkins, him having that familiarity with the Keith Williams and with Greg Roman's system, that's helped that much more. And then of course with us having a rookie receiver make the impact that he's had despite being injured and despite coming on late with Rashad Bateman, it's been a nice thing. And I know with Hollywood in his rookie year, he definitely made an immediate impact too. Loved it in Miami. Hopefully they can do the same thing. But anyway, Greg Roman and the offense, they've definitely turned a corner in a good way. And I've been liking what I've been seeing from them. And it's just that consistency. It's all about consistency with the offense. And hopefully they just continue being innovative and they continue to get different guys involved, because that's also been something big too. Now, I do feel like there could be improvements with the running game for sure. And also there could be some improvements with sort of hiding the deficiencies of the offensive line, maybe moving the pocket a little bit, maybe have Lamar do some more rollout plays or whatnot. But so far, so good heading into the bye week.
Yeah, I think so too. And there are those things to improve upon, but there is, one thing that stays consistent. And that is whenever Lamar Jackson is on the field, the Ravens offense is a threat to score on any given play. And I know we saw where teams during that stretch, Detroit and Denver and Indianapolis, they were keying in on the Ravens run game and saying, hey, Lamar, you're going to beat us with your arm. You're not going to do it at all. And what did he do? He beat them. So I know it took, a 4th and 19 and a 66-yard field goal to come back in some of them. But at the same time, I mean, wins are wins. You go 1-0, you go 0-1. If you want to tie, you can do that too. But that's what it is. I think that this Ravens offense has the potential. But as you mentioned, in order to get that top gear, to get to the highest potential they can, it's the run game, the consistency, the offensive line, and those things kind of meshing together as one to give the Ravens a complete offense, probably the most complete offense they've had in the Lamar Jackson era.
Yeah.
We're going to head into our final break now, though. When we get back, we'll be flipping that field, talking about the defensive side of the ball for the Ravens. So stay tuned for that, and we will be right back. But did you know the Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever? They have so many delicious flavors, including coconut, raspberry, mint brownie, strawberry, orange, and German chocolate. Not only are Built Bar flavors the best tasting, but they're healthy too. You can order today and get that mint brownie or raspberry or whatever you like. So go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right. We've returned here, our final segment of this Purple Friday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still here with IngravenVids. And Ingraven, we talked about the Ravens offense. through 7 weeks as they're in the bye week right now, the Ravens are. But on the defensive side of the ball, I know people have been very underwhelmed by what this unit has done. I know the Chargers game was that one game where people said, is this defense back? Because the Chargers game was phenomenal. They stopped a very high-powered Justin Herbert-led offense. Austin Eckler in there, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. But then the Bengals game just kind of raises all those doubts again because the team goes back to not tackling. The scheme isn't there. They're missing tackles. They're getting pressure but not getting sacks, which is what we've seen. You mentioned the scheme in the first segment, Ingraven, and I wanted to kind of get your opinion on that a little bit more because it's been under my impression where I think this was the year we were going to figure out whether it was talent or whether it was scheme for this Ravens team because this isn't like, for example, with the sacks, the Ravens have always been a high pressure team, but they just haven't been able to get the quarterback down. And we've seen stretches where they'll get like 7 sacks in one game, and then the next 4 games they'll get 1 total. Right. So that's been something over the last couple of seasons, and it feels like it's a bit better this year, but it still is crept up. So what have you thought of Don Martindale's scheme this year, and how can he improve that coming out of the bye?
I think it's really just about being a responsible blitzer and not being an arrogant play caller. And because, I mean, you know he's going to blitz. We know he's going to blitz. We know that's his thing, live by, die by. That's fine, but just do it in the right situations. And with Joe Burrow has been very successful against the blitz this year. And early on, the Ravens, they were blitzing and like they were getting pressure. And Joe Burrow, some of his football, they were sailing. They were going a little high over the receivers' heads and whatnot. And that was early on. But it seemed like the Bengals, they made some adjustments in those blitzes. They weren't working the same. But the Ravens, he kept on bringing them. And then you're leaving guys one-on-one. And you see like Marlon Humphrey, he's struggling. He's struggling with Ja'Marr Chase. I mean, struggling, not even a strong enough word to have Marlon Humphrey was getting dealt with by Ja'Marr Chase. But, and kudos to Ja'Marr Chase for just being amazing that game and really all season. But we need like more safety help. It should be guys behind these corners. If you see these corners are getting beat, you see guys running free, give them some help. And I do think that this year has it's shown that it is scheme. Scheme is a big part of it. It's not everything, but it is a big part of it. Because you look over at New England and you see, oh, Matt Judon, he's over there balling. Oh, okay, hey, they do your thing. And I know with a lot of Ravens fans, Matt Judon, it was always a question like, man, why is all these sacks? Oh, they shouldn't pay him because he's not all that. And then he goes to New England and he goes and does his thing. Yannick Ngakoue right now, and I know he wasn't the best fit, so that's not the best example, but still, he complained about the scheme. And he went over to the Raiders, and he's doing this thing now. So it's just I just wish he would do a better job of putting guys in position to have success and recognizing early on, like, hey, all right, if this isn't working, you know what? Let's fix it. Let's make some adjustments to just try to make things a little bit easier, and let's try to just simplify things. So I really wish he would do that. I hope he does that moving forward.
Yeah, and the defense can be so complicated, especially for younger players and guys who are just trying to find their way throughout the league. And I know one very controversial player within the Ravens flock right now is Patrick Queen and what he's been able to do this year. Now, he had a great start to the year. Week 1 against the Raiders, I thought he played a very good game, but then we kind of saw his play drop off, the tackling, the processing, playing too fast. All that stuff kind of caught up with him to the point where the Ravens had to insert Josh Bynes into the starting lineup. They moved Patrick Queen into more of that will linebacker while Josh Bynes plays the mic, and Queen has looked better. He doesn't have as many responsibilities, which is not like, oh, Patrick Queen can't do it with responsibilities. He's a young player right now. And in my opinion, Ingraven, I feel like on a losing team, if this Ravens team was like 1-6 right now, it would be bad, but, Patrick Queen would be able to work through his mistakes on a losing team. If Patrick Queen was in Jacksonville right now, people making mistakes on a losing team is much less of a big deal than it is on a winning team. Because on a winning team, everybody's expected to play at a high level and come in there, and their mistakes are magnified because that one mistake can cost you a playoff spot, or it can cost you seeding. On a losing team, you expect guys to play through their mistakes. So it's one versus the other. What's the panic meter for you on Patrick Queen right now? Because he has looked better in his new role, but I know people still want him to be that, middle linebacker of the future. So what are your thoughts on Patrick Queen?
Yeah, that's a really good point you make about that he'd be more allowed, he'd have more freedom to make those mistakes on a losing team because the expectations overall would be a lot less. But because the Ravens are a successful team and a successful franchise, and they've had a lot of recent success as well, then the expectations are that much higher. Now, one thing I do give credit to the Ravens because they could have been like, hey, this is our first round draft pick from last year. We're leaving him right where he's at. He's gonna get it. But so I give them credit for demoting him or moving him, and demoting him because he only played, I think the last 2 games he played like less than 30 snaps in each one. But so that takes a lot. That takes a lot of you can't be too prideful to make a move like that, especially with a first round pick. But with Patrick Queen, again, he has looked more comfortable, and he did talk about it in the press a few days ago that was the role that they have him in now is the role that he played in college. So it's something that he's more familiar with, something that he's more comfortable with, and that can really ease the mentals for Patrick Queen because in football that's where it all starts. Like you could be the strongest, you could be the fastest, but if you don't have it mentally, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. So with Patrick Queen right now, it's a smart move to just really try to get his mentals more relaxed, and this can be a confidence booster for him. Like, all right, I'm the wheel now. All right, cool. I don't have all that responsibility like I used to. All right, cool. Well, let me focus on what I need to do. Let me focus on my responsibility and let me master that. And then in the future, all right, if I get some more responsibility, all right, cool, I'll be ready for it. But let me hone this in because it seemed like before, when he was the Mike, maybe he was trying to be like a jack of all trades, but he was really a master of none. And then even worse than that, instead of being a master of none, he just started being a bad tackler for maybe trying to do all this and do all that and think about all this and think about all that. But now you have him focusing on just a few responsibilities and that's it. All right, Patrick Queen, just focus on that. So now this will allow him to grow and this will allow him to just get better. It may come at a slower pace, but as long as he's getting better and not getting worse, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I think also in terms of Patrick Queen, with him being such a young player and him having that role, as you mentioned, I think that's the best part for him at this point because of just what he can focus in on, as you mentioned, and not have to have all these responsibilities coming in and kind of get in his own head because I think the mental is very important with NFL players for sure. But Ingraven, the Ravens secondary, the back half has been not amazing this year. They have Marlon Humphrey. Anthony Averett has played well outside of Indianapolis. The safety duo of Chuck Clark and Deshaun Elliott has really stepped up this year as well. But you look at it, and the pass defense is one of the worst in the league. They're giving up a ton of yards, and it just seems like chunk play after chunk play happens for a defense that prides themselves on not giving up big plays, especially in Cincinnati. So, Ingraven, in your opinion, what can this defense do to improve their pass defense over these next couple weeks as they come out of the bye?
I definitely fundamentals is big. Fundamentals are huge because that's the foundation for everything. The fundamentals are the basics, and the tackling. I know Ravens fans are tired of hearing about the bad tackling, but that's one of the Ravens' biggest issues right now on defense is bad tackling. The Jamar Chase, the play that we've seen so many times, whether on Twitter, on YouTube, on NFL Network, on ESPN, the play that we've seen so many times, it was a slant route, and Joe Burrow threw it to Jamar Chase. And it's like, all right, slant route. It was maybe like an 8-yard completion. But you miss one tackle, miss 2 tackles, miss 3, miss 4, and boom, he takes it to the house. And I think it was like an 82-yard reception, 82-yard touchdown reception. So with that being said, tackling is so essential because it stops a small play from becoming a big play. And instead of it stops a play that could end up being just a 5-yard gain, it stops that from being a 15-yard gain, and so on and so forth. So that's really, really important, especially with run defense, with pass defense too. With the secondary though, with Marlon Humphrey, he has just hasn't been his best season. He's had some good games. He also has some bad games. But this is where what I was talking about earlier with the scheme. I think it's important to recognize stuff early before it becomes a habitual problem throughout the game. And in that game, like, all right, you see Marlon Humphrey struggling with Jamar Chase, give him some more safety help. Well, try Anthony Averett on Jamar, like try switch it up, do something, because if you see the same thing, it just like, because Marlon Humphrey was getting dogged all game. It wasn't like, all right, it's a quarter, all right, Jamar Chase got the best of him this quarter. No, it wasn't like it was 2 quarters. All right, Jamar Chase got the best of him for 2. No, he was getting dogged all game long. So you got to recognize that. And it's not like he's a bad corner. He ain't going to be locked down every game. He ain't going to be making all these plays every single game. You want him to, but it's not going to happen. People have off days. People have off games. So you have to recognize as a coach, like, all right, my player is struggling right now. What do I need to do? What do I need to do to make sure that my player is not struggling as much? What do I need to do to put him in a better position? To maybe you not need to give him some help, because if a player keeps struggling like that in a game, then their confidence could be shot. It could be shot like that. So if you see your players struggling, then it's a possibility that their confidence is shot, and that's going to make them struggle even more. So you as a coach need to do a lot more. And again, it's not all on the coach. The players, they got to execute too. So with Marlon, again, everybody tackling is just so big, because I remember it's been in 2 different games. I think one was in the Chiefs game, but I forget which games it were. But Marlon Humphrey was telling Patrick Queen, "Hey, you got to wrap up," telling him that mid game. But in this game, Marlon, he should have took his own advice. But it's all good. Marlon will bounce back, man. Like Anthony Averett, he had his bad game, like you mentioned, against the Colts, and he's been playing pretty good throughout the majority of the season. But he had a bad game. It was almost looking like it was going to be a bad game against the Bengals. He started off hot, but they just kept attacking him early on. But then they were like, you know what? This guy Marlon Humphrey, he's good, but we got him. So I think that with the pass defense, again, to me is scheme over everything, man. I just really hope Wink just realizes things a lot quicker and makes adjustments and is willing to fix what he may feel isn't broken.
Yeah, and I know that, when you have a corner like Marlon Humphrey on your team, it's usually, all right, teams aren't going to throw to him because he's so good. But then, it's one play happens, they're like, all right, hold on. And then they're like, another play happens, like, all right, hold on. And then they keep going. And all of a sudden, Marlon Humphrey's having his worst game. I know some of the Ravens coaches mentioned Marlon Humphrey kind of his technique broke down over the course of the game, and it kind of contributed to what he was going through. But I agree, the scheme also setting your players up for success, but both on offense and on defense has been so huge. I think Greg Roman, as we talked about, has done a great job of that so far for the most part. Don Martindale has had his, fair share of it as well. But I think you kind of have to get that consistency. And that's another word you brought up, the consistency of this team, especially on defense. And it's no secret the Ravens are missing Marcus Peters. That's just what it is. Marcus Peters is a phenomenal player. And I would be shocked if any defense wasn't missing Marcus Peters, but he's such a great scheme fit with the Ravens. It's been hard to adjust to that, and I understand. But at the same time, I think they have the talent to definitely bounce back, as you mentioned, like Marlon Humphrey and the rest of them as well. But Ingraven, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for coming here on the show with me. Where can people find your work on Twitter, on YouTube, and anywhere else?
It's all IngravenVids on YouTube. That's the channel. We post content literally every single day, videos every single day. It's 99% Ravens, but there's some other stuff on there as well. So y'all can come through as team, keep it clean. It's a channel for everybody. You all more than welcome. So I appreciate you having me on. Yeah,
absolutely. Go check out Ingraven's work. He really, every piece of Ravens news and that NFL news in there as well, he's on top of it every single day. But that's all that I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. We'll take a 2-day break, and on Monday, we'll be diving back into Ravens football talk. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you on Monday.